which is the following. Can everyone see this photo okay?
Yes.
So
yes.
This looks pretty complicated. Probably might look a little intimidating, but we're going to break it down into individual steps. Now, for some people, this might be a little bit slower. For some people, it might be a little bit harder. I'll try and give you guys as much time as possible. And I'm also going to try and break it down into segments. So the first thing we do when we sketch is we look for basic shapes and segments. And right off the bat, I notice a few things when I look at this picture, right? I notice the following. I notice that I can divide it into different sections. I would say there's a bottom section down here, right, which is this pool of water. We've got a middle section here, which is our falls. We've got this opening section of the rock right here. And then I also noticed that along the rock cliff face here, we have some jagged areas that go up like this. So our basic sketch already has a form, even though it looks overwhelming. We're almost looking at it as if we're looking at it without our glasses, right? We're kind of looking at it as if it's blurry, and we're looking for basic outlines and shapes. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your pencil and your canvas, and I want you to lightly sketch the sections that you see. Now, I'm going to show you really quickly what that will look like for those who aren't as familiar. So don't start yet. So the first thing I want to do is I want to set up my canvas portrait, right? The tall way, not the wide way, because the photograph is a tall photograph. Next, I want to divide it into my sections. So I've got my first section down here, which is my pool of water. I'm putting it in very lightly. You should put it in lighter than I am. I'm putting it a little darker so you can see. We've got our fall section. We've got our upper opening section. And we've got some of the jagged areas of the cliff face. So it's a pretty simple sketch when we're just doing a basic outline. I think the last time I did this workshop, I think we did like a barn in a field. And so that one involved a few more layers. That one involved some amount of depth with mountains, but here it's a pretty straightforward shape. So I want you to go ahead and put that in, but I also want you to keep in mind that these things, while they look simple, are in specific places. So the opening here ends at the top of our page. So if you were to go and not look at it closely, you might do something like this. That would be too wide, right? So make sure you pay attention to the angles of our rock face. This area here is rounded, but if I were to sketch it, it's almost horizontal. There isn't a ton of depth there. So pay special attention to some of those features. Any questions about that first step? Okay, go ahead and put that in the best you can. We'll give everyone a few minutes. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to shout out.
I'm not seeing on the right side the jagged line. It seems more diffused.
Fair enough. So whatever you see, sketch it as you see it.
There you go.
Okay. Yes, it is definitely a shallower line on the right side. You're absolutely right. Good eye.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And again, as you're using your pencil, make your lines soft, not too dark. The acrylic will go over it, but in areas where the acrylic is thinner, if your pencil line is thicker, it might peek through a little bit, depending on the type of acrylics that we have. So keep it on the lighter end, I would say. Oh, and thank you, Hillary, for sharing the name of my book. I'll share a link to it if anyone's interested. No pressure. I have a website with all sorts of crazy stuff on it. If you're interested in my work, which I would be flattered by, you're welcome to take a look. And in response to one of the questions, yes, not next Sunday, but March 20th. That is correct. That's a question from Diane. Yes. Raise your hand if you feel like this sketch is pretty approachable. Feels kind of approachable. Raise your hand if it's absolutely terrifying. Okay, I see minimal hand raising. Then we're off to a good start. Then I picked a good picture. So let's pause really quick. And I want to invite everyone, no matter where you are in your sketch, to hold your picture up to the camera, just so I can see very quickly where we're at. On 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's take a look. Hold them up close. Excellent. These are looking wonderful so far. So continue to do your outline as needed. I'll talk about the next step for those who are ready, but there's no rush. So once we've put our basic outline, our loose shapes, we want to go back in and we want to start to tighten things up a little bit. So for example, first off, I put the waterfall like this, just this loose rectangle, when really there's a few different areas where it bounces, slides down, bounces again. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to kind of tighten things up a little bit. I'm going to work my way along the rock face and I'm going to outline the edges of the rocks a little more exactly. So this is our sort of tightening up and cleaning up phase, right? So go through, tighten things up as needed, go through the edge lines of our water pool here. You can also start to put in some of the major features we have, like we have a log down here. We've got some chunks of moss, not all of them, put a few of them in and kind of put things in a little bit more exactly. Any questions on that? Okay. So when you're ready, you can go ahead and do that. You may also notice that there's a boulder blocking up the waterfall at the top.
Right.
Don't forget that. Absolutely. Yes, Janet. Don't forget that. That's a very important detail.
But we don't sketch in shadows, right?
Yes. No need for shadows at the moment. That is a good question. That comes later. But it will be important. And as you're looking for some of the other details, right, like the moss or the grass, I noticed this area around here, around the waterfall, that's where a lot of the moisture is. So that's where a lot of our green moss is. So you might want to put in a few of those chunks, especially in that area. We're creating a blueprint for our painting. Now, as far as the actual rock face itself, right? Once you're working your way on the outlines and you feel like you're satisfied with the outlines of things, which we're not there yet, But if you get to that point, I notice that there's a lot of cracks in this rock face, but we're not going to put all of them. We want to divide it into a few sections. I see a major one here. I'll probably want to include that. I see a big one over here. I'll probably want to include that. I see a decent sized one here and a decent sized one over here. So those are probably around the areas I want to start with. Obviously, if we wanted to go full photorealism, we could go a long way with this, but that's not where we're headed today. We want to keep this acrylics workshop decently relaxing.
Yep.
Not too overwhelming. Part of the reason I picked this photo in particular is because, like I was saying before, hopefully we'll soon be approaching spring. I know it's still a ways off, but I'm already ready for it. And you might find yourself with time to go outside and paint. This will help it feel a little bit more approachable, hopefully, and I encourage you guys to do so. Painting outside is incredibly enjoyable. I wish I had more time for it myself. So I already mentioned a few things while you're working on your detail level of sketching, you're fleshing out, but I'm just going to text it right here at the top. I'm going to write it on the picture. So if you need a reminder, it's here for you. You've got it all the way. Now at the very, very top, we see that there's a hill in the background and a tree. You can loosely put that in as well, just very lightly. We can't see very much of it. Raise your hand if you feel like you've done more than 80% of our sketch. Raise your hand if you're closer to the 50% area. Okay, so by the end, your sketch should look somewhat like mine here. I've got the major edges, I've got some of the major features, some of the major moss. I'm going to give you guys another 5 minutes. We'll take our time, and then we'll talk about our basic color setup. Don't hesitate to ask any questions.
I feel like, excuse me, some of my lines have gotten maybe too dark as I refined.
Sure.
Should I lighten them up with an eraser?
You can if you'd like. Ultimately, we'll be painting over a lot of it, so chances are some of the darker lines might show up a little bit. It's not disastrous, but for the cleanest looking effect, you may want to lighten them up slightly.
Okay.
On that note as well, if you feel like you put in some lines that you're now realizing are incorrect, right, or in the wrong place, or they're a little messy, you might want to erase those as well so they don't confuse us when we start applying our painting. The more accurate our sketch is now, the easier it will be to apply our paints.
Every time you look at it, you see something different.
There's a lot going on, especially in a nature setting. There's a lot of little details.
Eli, can you make yours in the full screen? Because I'm having trouble seeing your sketch.
Oh, absolutely. I can unshare here. Is it not in full screen at the moment? How about now?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was spotlighted already. I apologize. Let me move this back because it has all my computer passwords on it. There, I'll put that there. Yes. Let me see if I can make it a little less blurry. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Diane. Let's see. I can even zoom in a little bit. So you can see here, I've got my top area here, got my rock. I've got my major areas of cliff, cleaning it up right now. Got my falls at the bottom, and I got my logs. Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll leave that up there for another few seconds, and I'll pull the photo back up for those who need. Yours may also not look exactly like mine, and that could be okay. We're going to go through the painting together. It doesn't have to be 100% exactly the same as mine. This picture is going to be a little bit more impressionistic than the last one that I did last workshop, which is a little more exact. I think it was a barn in Montana. Okay, I'm going to share back that photograph again. Now, if you feel like you're almost ready to put out your paints, right? I'm going to start putting out my basic colors. You don't have to put them out right away, but if you're ready to, you can put out the following colors. I'm going to do this slowly so I give time for people to catch it. It's always hard for me to tell via Zoom where people are at exactly, which is why I've been asking people to raise their hands. But if you feel like I'm going too fast, please tell me. I want to get stuff done, but I don't want to rush anyone. If you're ready with paints, I'm going to put out some white, some black. And I have more than one green, but I'm going to put out the lighter of my green, not the darker one. I have a light ivy looking kind of green. I'm just going to put a little bit, maybe the amount like the size of like a nickel, not too much, or a quarter. You can always add more later. I'm going to put out some blue. I have primary blue. I've got brown. I have two browns here. I have a slightly different set of yours. So if you have any questions about the paste, let me know. I have a warmer kind of a burnt sienna here. And I have a darker brown, almost a grayish brown. It's burnt umber. I'm going to put both of those out. And I have a bright lemon yellow. I'm going to put that out as well. And for the moment, that should be enough to start with. So when you're putting out your paint, it should look something like this. And I'll write those colors on the page. You can put them on a paper plate. If you don't have a paper plate, sometimes I use like a sheet of glossy magazine paper, something that's non-porous.
Oof.
I'm going to write those colors on the screen as well.
Yike, my green is horrible. Ugh.
Well, we're going to be mixing a lot of these colors, so a lot of them won't look the same as they do now.
It's good.
So not to worry. You may want to put out a little bit more of white than the other colors as well, because we're going to be using probably more white. Oh, and you know what? I have some red. I'm going to put out a light red as well. Like my primary red. Yeah, just a little bit of that one.
Did you say raw sienna or burnt sienna?
You can do a little bit of both.
Okay.
Just make
I
sure you
actually don't have those.
Okay.
The set you recommended was out of stock.
Oh, no problem. No problem. We can work with less supplies. If you have more, it makes it a little simpler, but we can mix anything we need to. And we'll talk about that in detail.
Light green.
You also want to have some sort of scrap sheet of paper that you're comfortable kind of using to test some of our colors. We always want to test our colors once we mix them. They'll look different on the page than they will on our plate. You don't need gloves for these. I like to wear latex gloves because I paint all day, and so a lot of it gets on my arm and doesn't come off, but you don't need them unless you'd like them. I don't think it was in the supply list, but if you have a round, you're welcome to use them. Raise your hand if you're still sketching. Okay, seems like people are just about ready to move forward. Correct me if I'm wrong. So make sure you have all your paints. Make sure you have your water. I'll go through that setup again. We've got our paints. We have our water, of course. We got a big one. We've got our brushes. I've got a scrap sheet here to test my colors on. I've got lots of paper towels. You can push your pencil to the side, and if there's any pencil lines that you find are really dark, like Janet was asking before, you can lighten them a little bit with your eraser. You don't have to, you can. It makes it look a little cleaner at the end. Don't erase anything completely, of course. Okay, so before we start our painting, where do we start? Does anyone have any questions on where we start? Or any suggestions, rather? Does anyone have any suggestions on where we start? What do you think? Well, we have to start somewhere in our painting. We've got a few different areas. Sorry, someone was saying something.
Start at the top.
You could potentially start at the top. What I like to start with before the top, though, is I like to start with our lightest areas, and I like to start specifically with our lightest tones, right? Now, in this case, what our tones are those are the areas that it's like the underlying color, the underlying colors. For example, there's a lot of different colors here in the water, but I see two major tones. Back here, I'll zoom in here. Oh, one moment. If I zoom in, right down here, I see a few major tones. I see back here by the edges of the rocks, I see like a greenish grayish color in the water, kind of a murky seaweed looking color. Everyone sees that, right?
Yes.
More or less, right? In the front
Yes.
here, I see kind of a yellowish brownish, not the most pleasing looking color for water, but there it is, right? So how do we, so in reality, there's a lot of colors in the water, right? There's lots of different yellows, there's some darker patches, some lighter patches. We want to pick the major ones, our major tones, right? If I'm looking at the cliff, there's a lot of different colors here, but if I can identify, I see a bluish area over here, I see a brownish area over here, and I see a dark green over here. So we want to mix a few of our major tones, and we're going to mix them together. So for this, you may even want a second plate to mix on. You want to have enough room that your colors don't get mixed together. So we want to start by mixing the major colors of our rock face. And the first one is going to be a light gray. I'm going to take some white. That's a little bright here. Let me see if I can turn my camera. And a tiny bit of black. Keep in mind that our darker colors are very potent. So a little bit goes a long way. You don't want too much.
Eli, what's the right brush to use here?
That's an excellent question. For mixing, you can just use whatever medium round brush you have. I would say a medium, one of your medium or slightly larger brushes. But at this particular point, it's kind of doesn't really matter too much. I wouldn't use a tiny one. So I've got a good light gray going here. You know, it's a little hard to see because of the light. That's number one. I'm gonna put that in a circle over here. So you only get a lot of white and a little bit of black. Now you want to make a fair amount because it's very hard to remix the same color. So if we have a lot at the beginning, it'll make our lives easier later on.
Do you water it down or do you keep it the thickness of?
That's an excellent question. There's no need to water it at the moment. You can keep it thick. Yes. If you're familiar with watercolors, with watercolor, we do a lot of watering down. With acrylics, we'll do some, but significantly less. We like our acrylics to be a little bit more viscous. If there's too much water in our acrylics, they'll start to kind of run. And whereas with watercolor, that can be used as a technique, with acrylics, it kind of just makes it go everywhere. It'll also dry unevenly. So we definitely want our paints on the thicker side. Closer to what one might want with oils. Those who are familiar. I'm going to slowly start mixing my second color. And if you need me to slow down or repeat anything for the mixing, please let me know. I'm going to start with another pile of white. If you need more white from the tube, you can get it. And I'm going to take a dab of yellow, just a little bit. It's pretty potent. I've got a soft yellow color. And then I'm going to mix in a dab of whatever our warmer brown is. You have more than one brown, your warmer brown. Warmer being a brighter color versus a cooler or grayer color. Now, part of the tricky thing about this photograph is that a lot of the colors, without close inspection, they all kind of blend together. So we're going to divide them up a little bit. We're going to take a little bit of an impressionist approach. So if anyone here really likes Van Gogh, you're in the right place. There seems to be quite a glare from my lamp. So if anyone's having trouble seeing the colors, let me know. I'm going to try and angle my lamp a little bit away. I don't think it likes the waxy finish on the plate. Now, if you find you're running out of room and you need a third plate, don't hesitate to get it. We want to give ourselves as much room as possible. A clean space is a happy space for working. Our next color is going to start with some white again. All our colors are pretty muted. I'm going to take a dab of blue. If you have too much on the brush, you may want to wipe some off on our scrap paper. It's very, very potent. Now you'll probably end up with a color that's a pretty sky blue, soft blue because of the white. We want to add a little bit of black to that, just a tiny bit. So we end up with something a little grayer. You'll probably get something like that. I'm actually going to go grab a second plate myself. I will be right back.
That blue is not so good. I should-
Anyone having any trouble with our colors so far?
What was the last color you added to the white and blue?
White, blue, and a tiny dab of black. And again, I can't stress this enough, with the darker colors, really make sure to wipe off your brush before you dab it, because you want the tiniest bit. It's very, very strong. Now, if you put too much black, try mixing in some more white. See if you can lighten that up. And if your brush is the same brush you're using, maybe put some water on it and wipe it off in a paper towel so you don't carry that color over.
I've been mixing each color with a different brush. Is that a good idea?
I usually like to use the same brush just because I personally find it confusing, but you can if you want to. If you find that it's easier to use different brushes, you can. You can also just wipe the same brush off.
Okay, we'll see how it goes.
Sometimes if I'm mixing a lot of really dark colors with the same brush, I'll use a separate brush for the lighter colors, because I find that no matter how much I try, there's always a little black left on my brush and it pollutes my lighter colors. For our purposes, it probably won't be a problem, but you can try that if you'd like. Excellent question. Now our next color, once again, we're going to use some white and a tiny bit of warm brown. So you'll end up with kind of like a sort of a skin tone kind of color, something like that.
All right, quick question. I ran out of brown. What can I mix to get that?
That's an excellent question. So if you're out of brown, you can mix together. I would use some green. Let's do it together. I put a little bit of green over here. It's all about amounts. A little bit of red. Now, depending on what tone, right, whether you want it to be a warmer, brighter brown or a darker brown, depends when you add next, right? If it's something like this, where I want it to be warmer than what I have, I will add some more red. Something like that. If you want to mix a second darker brown, I would create a separate pile over here of some brown and some green, and I might add a little bit of black to that. And then I have two separate browns. Does that make sense? Color mixing takes a lot of practice. So if you don't get your color the first time, it's okay. It's not easy to do. It takes a very delicate touch. I'll give everyone a minute to finish fixing their first 4 colors, or 5 if you need the brown. Does anyone have any questions about those mixing of those colors? Anything you want me to repeat about any of the colors, or a color you're having trouble mixing?
The brown was just brown. We're doing just brown.
So if you're mixing this brownish color, right, it's white with just a little bit of a warm brown.
Oh, that's it there. Oh, a lot of white.
Eli, I think some of my paint is drying already.
So if your paint is drying a little bit, you may have some water, you may have too much water in it. If there's a lot of water in your paint, is there any water in your paint?
Is there water in it? I didn't add any water.
Okay, so in that case, you might need a little more paint. If the paint is too thin, it might dry a little too quickly. So I would remix one of those colors on top. If, for example, my gray is drying, I'm going to take a little more white on top of it, a little more black, and kind of remix it on top.
Okay.
Our acrylics dry fairly quickly. The thinner they are or the wetter they are, the faster they dry, as far as wetter being with water. So you may have too little paint. That being said, we don't want to wait too long, because you're right. Even with the thicker colors, it will start to dry fairly quickly. Any other questions about our first 4 colors? Okay. Raise your hand if you've mixed our first 4 colors. Okay, mostly. Okay. So let's talk about putting in our first 4 colors. Now we just want to put in our tones. So the first thing we want to start with is identifying the first area of tone, the lightest area. Now from my view, that's this area up here. And we're going to fill this whole area with our beigeish brownish color. So I'm going to show you that right now.
Okay, what are we going to do here?
And I'm going to demonstrate. So can everyone see my page okay? Okay, I'm going to go to this area up here, which is that area. I'm going to take my brownish beigeish color. That's this one over here. Mine's drying a little bit too, so I'm going to add a little more white and brown to it. Oh, too much. And I would recommend using a flathead brush if you have one. A flathead brush is a brush with a flat tip like this.
Okay.
If you don't have a brush like that, a medium-sized round brush will do.
Maybe
You
another
want to take that brush, you want to slowly work along the edge of our pencil line.
Okay.
Now I'm already running low on my color, which means I'm going to mix some more. As close as I can. I'm going to fill that area with that tone. Now the goal by the end of today will be to do most of our tones. So when we meet in a few weeks, we'll be able to add our details. So we're going to start with tone number 1.
We could do this, Danny, huh?
You should end up with something that looks like this. Any questions on that first step?
What color is that? Light brown?
So yes, that's a little bit, that's white with a dab of warm brown. So I'll show you one more time here. I've got some fresh white over here. I'm going to put some of that white on our plate here. And I'm going to add a dab of our warmer brown. So this is our warmer brown here. I'm going to mix it together. And I end up with like a skin tone type color. Like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Is it fairly transparent? I can't tell from.
It's a little hard to see on my camera. It should be very, very light. It shouldn't be super transparent, but it probably will be a little bit. If you find that it's so clear that it's drying almost translucent, ooh, I got yellow all over my page. If you're finding that it's clear to the point where it's almost translucent, you're probably using too little paint. And you probably need a little more on top. But we'll be painting over all of these layers anyway, so it's not a huge concern. Excellent. I got yellow paint all over my arm. That's how you know we're really getting into the thick of it. That's where we're doing some serious art here. It's a good day when you've got a blue, yellow, or all whatever shade you're working with on. That's how you know you have a good painting day. Okay.
Okay.
Now for our next area, this area in the middle, I'm going to use our bluish color that we mixed. And again, you might need a second load of that, but let's start with our, actually, you know what? Let's start with our gray. We have this whitish gray that we mixed. That was with a little bit of white and a lot of black, or a lot of white rather, and a little bit of black. I'm going to remix it with some water because it is starting to dry. Add a little more black paint as well. Wake it up a little bit. And then I'm going to work along the edge here. Start to fill that area in. And I'm going to go to the edge of where I put that moss. Maybe I'll cover some of it here at the edges here. Put the edge there. And we'll start with that grayish color. Nice and slow, smooth strokes. Now, the other thing with your strokes is that you want to have them going down like this towards the center for our purposes. We're going to have them all kind of consistent. So they're all pointing towards the center of our page. You can see them streaking inward here. Now, if you get any paint on your table, like I did, I recommend wiping it down while it's wet. It's much easier to clean that way. Once it's dry, it's a little harder to wipe up.
Eli, you're listening to a real beginner. Is
Yeah.
it possible to see the picture of the waterfall rather than the paints on your paper plate?
That's an excellent question. So I can switch back and forth between them. I find that on Zoom, some people find my plate more helpful and some people find the picture helpful, but I can't show them both super well at the same time. So I'm happy to switch back and forth between them.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I will do my best. If you want me to switch again, just let me know.
Yeah, switch again.
Okay, let's give it another 10 seconds here and I'll switch back. But again, if you're working from the photo more than my sketch, this is the area we want to gray in. Right above where this blue area starts. Let me give it another second here and I'll switch back for those that were using the sketch. Okay, and I'll swap back there from those who need. I can also, I will send the photo to you in the chat. And that way you can download it on your computer if you'd like, if you're able to do that. And that way you can look at it on your screen even when I don't have it up. Let me find it and I will send it to you.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I should have thought of it sooner. Let's see here. Oh, weird. It doesn't want to let me. For some reason, it doesn't want to let me send it. Hillary, are you still in the room?
I'm here. What can I do to help?
Can I email you the photo and have you send it to everyone really quickly? Is that something we can do at the moment?
Well,
Or not so much?
no, because I'm not on my computer. Might be a
Okay.
little harder, I think.
For some reason, it's not letting me download it. So you know what I'll do? I'll share it in a Dropbox. I can do it that way.
If I make you a host, would that give you that ability?
That's an excellent question. I've actually never seen a Zoom where it didn't let me do it. So why don't we try it and see if that helps? And if not, I can send it in a Dropbox and that can work too.
I'm sorry, I'll make you the host and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, let's try that and see if that helps.
Okay. Okay, so try that.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
try it now. Doesn't seem to be making a difference. So you know what? I'll try it a slightly different way. I don't know why that is, but Zoom does as it wills, unfortunately. That's my experience with Zoom. That's okay. We're creative here.
Oh, where'd you go? Oh, I want to make sure I make you co-host.
Oh, that's okay.
All right.
One moment, guys. Thank you for your patience. Okay, I've just shared an image in the chat. You should be able to click it and open it. It should open into a Dropbox. Is that working for people?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. That was wonderful to hear. Okay, so let's talk about our third color. Now that's this area down here at the bottom. And that's going to be our lightish blue color. So let me pop back out here. Now, if that color's already dry, put some water on it, put some fresh white and some fresh blue. My paints are drying faster than even I expected, so you might have the same problem. Okay, and you will probably end up with a color that looks like this. Add a dab of gray to it, or dab of black if you haven't already. That's what I'm going to do here. So I have a color like this, white, a little blue, and a dab of black. And I'm going to put that in this section. Just like that. I'm going to bring that all the way down to the water's edge. And I'm going to work along the area here. That's the bottom of the rock here. I'm going to make that a little wavy like it is in the picture. And again, these strokes are all going to go sort of diagonally, horizontally and diagonally towards the center, towards our falls. Our view is rushing towards the water. That's our focus. Any questions on that step? Okay, so far so good. I'm looking for hard questions here. Give me a really tough one.
Why doesn't my paint look strokey like yours? That's a tough one. Too much water, I bet.
It could be too much water. It could be the type of paint you're using is slightly different from mine. Different brands make their paint slightly differently. It could be that it could be your brush potentially. Doesn't have to be stroking. If it's a little more solid, that's okay too. Doesn't ruin anything.
Okay.
But if you do have strokes, we want to try and keep them in the same direction. Keep it a little organized. Now, when you're done with the blue, we want to mix a little bit more of our brownish white color, our tan color that we used up here at the top. So when you're ready, you want to mix a little more of that with a little bit of brown. And I'm going to put that up here in this corner. Now I outlined a big crevice over here. So I'm going to work along the edge of that crevice. If you don't have that in and you didn't identify that, you may want to put it in now. It creates like a zigzag sort of shape. And I'll show it once again on the photo so you can see it. It is this outline here, this kind of crevicey, jagged sort of area. Really, it's a lot of different things, but we're just doing a simple outline. So see how it creates a zigzag sort of shape? If you haven't already, you may want to pencil that in quickly. And we're going to fill that with our beige color. I'm going to go all the way to the top here, to where the rocks hit the sky, down to our waterfall, and in along the edge. Any questions on that area? Okay. Your painting should look something like this. If it doesn't look like this and you need some help adjusting, let me know. Because our acrylics will dry fairly quickly, you may want to repaint over them, and you can certainly do that. In particular, if after this workshop you're looking through the video recording and you want to give it a second go, acrylics are easily painted over. You can always repaint your section once it dries. So if you feel like it's off, don't panic.
My two beiges are significantly different. That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
So it's not a catastrophe. If you'd like to adjust it, you can. If you'd like to leave it, it's also okay. We're going to be going over a lot of this with some other colors to blend it a little bit. But if you find that one is a little bit too dark or a little too brown, you could try going over it with some very light watered down white, or wait till it dries and then try remixing the color.
Okay.
It's a little tricky for me to help with that specifically over Zoom, unfortunately. But if you give it a second go and can't seem to get it quite right, you can show it to me and I can make my suggestions. Now, if you're ready for the next step, and if you're not, if I'm going too quickly, let me know. I'm going to use some more of that gray from over here. Again, that's white with a tiny dab of black. I'm going to work that along the edge of our zigzag on the inside. If you find that your color is spreading thin, like mine, it's coming out kind of dry, You may want some water on the brush, put a little bit. You want to fill that in and then outline this part here. I made a dividing line right over there, matching our gray on the other side. You want a shape like this. You want to fill that in. And again, if you're having those streaks, you want them to point towards our falls. And you will end up something like this. Now, if you're moving on to your next color, you want to mix some fresh version of that whitish tan color. Now, if you're having trouble remixing it, it doesn't have to be exactly the same color, but remember, it's a lot of white with a dab of brown. If you look at it and you say that's too dark, you can add some more white into it. If it's too light, you might need a tiny more bit of brown. The brown is very potent. So when you stick your brush into it, you might want to test some on the side of the page or the side of your plate, wipe a little bit of it off, make sure it's soft before you mix it in. And we're going to apply that here. We're going to put a triangle here along the edge of our falls, right to where our pool is at the bottom. And please ignore my yellow. It was on my arm and it got on the page. You don't need to copy that. That part you can skip. Unless you want a bright yellow firefly in our waterfall, I suppose. That can be added later. That actually might be very pleasant, now that I think about it. Now for the other side, for the remainder of that area, we're going to use that white with a little bit of blue in it and a tiny dab of gray. From the side over here, same color. Need to remix it, white, blue, and a dab of gray. Strokes leading in towards our falls. By the end, you should have something that looks like this. So when you're ready, we're actually going to mix two new colors. I'll give everyone another second. Now's a good time for me to run to the bathroom, and then we'll talk about our next two colors. I will be right back. Okay, next we are going to mix two fresh colors. Now the first is going to involve the following. It's going to have some green. It's going to give it a little more this time, make it a little thicker. a little bit of red. And a little bit of black. So the color you want to end up with will look something like this. Kind of a, it looks darker on my camera. So I'm actually going to lighten it up a little bit. You can see a little more accurately. I'm going to add some white to it. That's a little better. That's a little closer. It still looks darker on my camera, but kind of a whitish, grayish ivy color. So again, Matt's green, a little bit of red, a little bit of black. Green, red, a little bit of black. Now that new color we've mixed is going to go along the inside edge of the pool here, just like that. You may want to use a rounder brush for this. It's up to you. It's going to go all the way like that on that side. And it's going to do the same on the other side. Any questions on this section? These strokes are also going to go in towards the center. Now the other color we're going to mix is going to include some green. Let me create a fresh pile of green over here. Some yellow. A little bit of brown. And a little bit of white. So again, green, a little more yellow than green. Green is going to be a little bit stronger. Yellow, green, a little bit of our warmer brown, and a little bit of white. Now that area is going to go here. It's going to go around the center of the falls. It's going to fill in everything else except for our logs. We can work around our logs. If you overlap them a little bit, that's okay. Go around my logs and outline them. Now we're getting towards the end of our time already. It really flies by. So there's a couple more things I want to go through very, very quickly. But before I get to them, does anyone have any questions about anything we've covered so far at any step? Now's your chance. Okay. Now the next color we need is going to be green and blue and a little bit of black. Green, blue, and a little bit of black. And we're going to make a dark green color. You know what? It looks black in the light. Let me make it a little lighter. There we go. A dark green color like that. Green, blue, and a little bit of black. And that color is going to go here. It's going to start up here, close to the top of our falls, because there's a moss growing around our falls. It's going to go along the inside, and I'm going to make these strokes going in towards our fall. It's going to overlap our blue here, just a little ways out. It's going to come all the way to the edge. I'm even going to go over the edges of our fall a little bit into the center. And, excuse me, on the other side, I'm going to do something similar. In, around, our falls. We've got this sort of soft outline. It's a little thicker on the left than it is on the right. And I'm going to fill that area in. I'm even overlapping some of my previous colors. You should have something that looks like this. Now this looks very, very different from our photograph, but we're going to do some blending and we're going to make it a little bit cleaner. That'll probably be next time. Now, while I'm at it, up here, yes.
Quick question. I was delayed in doing the last color mixture. It was black with green.
I'll show you one more time, no problem. It's green, blue, and a little bit of black. Now I'm also going to take that color while we're at it. I'm going to go up to my tree. In the top left corner, there's a tree peeking out. I'm going to fill that tree area as well. Just like that. So we're getting right at the end of our time. So the last thing I want to do very, very quickly, I'm going to go up here to my rock. There's a boulder that's blocking the edge of the falls. It's got two sides. It's got the back side facing us and the top side. The back side is going to be a triangle of black. I'll show you in the photo here. Right there. Oh, oops. I closed it. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. It's this area right over here. I'm going to fill that in with some black, and the top area over here is going to be a little bit of whitish blue, like we used before. So once I use the black, I want to make sure to wipe off my brush with water really well, because I just use a thicker amount. Take some white some blue, tiny bit of black like before. And that's going to be the top of our rock. And I believe that is the end of our time. Until next time, any questions on anything at all that you might have?
Just a quick, I miss the lightest yellow green, so it's green, yellow, and white.
It was, yes, I'll show you one more time. And any other colors that need to be remixed, let me know now. Of course, happy to help. We've got green, we got yellow, probably at least twice as much yellow, or maybe 3 times as much as the green, and some white, like that.
Okay, beautiful.
Like a
Thank
Gatorade
you.
color. Absolutely. Any other colors that need help being remixed? Speak now. This recording will also be available for you to practice. You can go over it then as well. And if you're going to practice this during our interim weeks, which are several, catch up to this point if need be, but please don't go beyond this. We'll be doing it together next time. We're going to talk about it. And I think with that, that is the end of our time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Pleasure. Hillary, is there anything?
Thank you. See you next time.
Yeah, so just a reminder again, March 20th at 10 o'clock. So we'll run from 10 to 11:30. And as soon as possible, I'll post the YouTube. I'll have probably tomorrow, have Kathleen send that out to everyone. And if not, it will be available sometime this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
What
Thank
really
you. Bye.
lovely turnout.
Lovely.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank